Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. So students of ICSE, welcome back to Shiksha Mark 108. 50 days remaining. So let's jump directly to a very important topic of physics, current electricity. So as you can see in the screen, we're going to be focusing on the topic current electricity. So the basic idea to understand this topic would be to know the basic concepts. So we start off with something called as the charge, which is given by the small letter Q. Now it can be positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. Alright, so that's Q. Now the charge of an electron is minus 1.6 times 10 raised to minus 19 coulombs. That's an important number that you should be remembering. The charge of a proton would be nothing but the same, but the sign would be changed. So it's going to be positive 1.6 times 10 raised to minus 19 coulombs. So that's something about charge. The next thing is we need to know what is capital Q. Now capital Q is going to be the number of charges times the charge of an electron. So how does this Q originate? The capital Q originates from the part where if we have something called as a line charge, or let's say an area charge or a surface charge. Alright, so it could be positive, 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 positive over here. It could be positive, negative, positive, negative. It could be positive, positive, negative, positive, positive, negative. So it's not just one charge over here as in the case of small q. That's just one unit charge. But capital Q is going to be a lot of charges. And that is how we're going to be working in life as well. It's not just going to be one charge. So capital Q is going to be, let's say, n times, all of these charges. So that's n for us. All right. And obviously times the charge of an electron. So that's going to be n times E. That's capital Q. And the unit of capital Q is also going to be coulombs. Okay. Pretty straightforward. Now, the idea is about coulombs in terms of current. You're just going to be taking the current. Current is nothing but the rate of flow of charge. What does that mean? You have a point charge over here, let's say at A, and it wants to go at point B. Now, it has to go from point A to point B in time t. So, if the charge Q goes from point A to point B in time t, that's called as current, electric current. So it's nothing but the rate of flow of charge. So it's Q over T. Or you know what, in fact it's going to be capital Q over T if we got a lot of charges. So capital Q, as we saw earlier, is n times E, which is the number of charge, times electron over T. So if you look at the unit, it's going to be coulomb per second, which is now going to be called as ampere. So if I know what is 1 ampere, it means that a charge of 1 coulomb passes in 1 second from point A to point B, that is. So quite a big charge. Now if you want to know how many electrons are there in a coulomb, it's quite straightforward. 1 electron has 1.6 times 10 raised to minus 19 coulomb charge. Of course, it's going to be a negative sign, but just to understand how many electrons are going to be there, we just ignore that negative sign for the moment. So if we have 1 electron, is going to be having this much of charge. So if I have 1 coulomb charge, how much is that going to be in number of electrons? So I'm just going to be doing a very simple, just a cross multiplication. So 1 times 1 is going to be 1, obviously, and this is going to be x times 1.6 times 10 raised to minus 19 coulombs. Now x taken on the other side, and obviously the value in the bracket taken on the other side goes down. So it's going to be 1 the whole upon 1.6 times 10 raised to minus 19. 10 raised to minus 19 goes up, it becomes 10 raised to plus 19, and we got something upon as 1 upon 1.6. So I'm just going to open my calculator and just going to see how the calculation works out. So if you look at this is going to be 1 divided by 1.6. So it comes out as 0.625 times 10 raised to 19. Of course, if you want to make this a bit sensible, it would be 6.25 into 10 raised to 18. So what does that mean? In 1 coulomb charge, you have got 6.25 into 10 raised to 18 electrons. That's a huge number of electrons. Alright, so I hope that makes sense to you regarding how you can find the number of charges or the number of electrons in one coulomb. So the important things that we discussed so far, we got the small q, which is a unit charge, we got the capital Q, we got the rate of flow of charge, which is given by current. Next bit you should be knowing is voltage. So voltage, or also called as the electric potential. Now try to understand this in a very straightforward manner. Potential means that the ability to do something. If there is an ability, the individual or that entity can definitely do something. Now, how do we understand this in terms of quantum physics, or let's say in terms of electrons or charges? So let's say I got a unit test charge. Now this is just one charge, as we know, is given by the small letter q. Now in this case, I'm going to be focusing on the charge sign. So it's going to be a unit positive test charge, and we got a line charge over here. So that's obviously a lot of charges. So we're going to be considering this to be positively charged line charged body. All right. So it's going to be positively charged body. Now this positive test charge is separated from this line charge by a certain distance, and it is such a way that these both are happy away from each other. What does this mean? As we know, like charges would always repel each other, yes, and unlike charges would obviously attract each other. So as we now see in this figure, the positive or the unit positive test charge is comfortably away from the line charge, so it's not going to do anything. So it's comfortably away. There's no real intention for it to go anywhere near the line charge, so it's happy where it is. Same goes for the line charge as well. It's happy where it is. Now let's say the potential now. So we'll say the potential. So I'm going to be considering this point as A and this point as B. So potential at A is pretty much 0. That's basically how the things are. Now what we do is we try to apply a bit of force. Now we're going to understand this through a bit of mechanical physics. So we push this charge by applying a bit of force, and obviously there's going to be a bit of displacement, and we bring that point charge from point A to point B. Now, as we know from mechanical physics, force times displacement is work. So we have done a bit of work on this. Now obviously this is not how it works over here, but let's just for a moment try to understand that. We applied a bit of force, and we have now kept it over here at point B by the application of that force. Now, we are not removing that force for a moment, okay? Consider that to be like a coiled spring, compressed spring in fact. So it's compressed. If this force is released, it will obviously expand and it will try to restore itself. So at this point, as soon as we get rid of this force, it would want to go anywhere but near this line charge. Does that make sense? Slightly making sense, I believe. Yeah. So obviously what do we get from here is that positive charge, whose potential at point A was pretty much 0, got some potential when it is now at point B. So obviously can I say, or can we understand this, that work was done in bringing this charge from A to point B, right? Quite straightforward. So work was done to bring this unit test charge from point A to point B. Thus, it has acquired some potential. The potential at B, we'll consider that to be max, because that's the maximum distance it can be close to it. Of course, it can obviously be on closest it can get to this positive line charge. So this thing is now going to acquire a lot of potential. As soon as we remove this force, it is now going to go anywhere but near this. So the potential at B is max. So how do we understand in terms of electric current, or in terms of the physics which deals with electric current or charge? Potential is nothing but given by the letter V, and we define the electric potential to be the work done per unit charge in bringing a point from infinity. So we're going to be considering this distance as infinity, as it is outside the field of this line charge. I hope that's making sense. So keep my hands all wide. I have a certain arm's length and I can have a certain reach as well. That's considerably similar to what these would be having. They're going to be having a sort of an influential region or a range. So this unit test charge which we started off with is way away from this influential range. So we're going to be considering that to be infinite distance. So if it is at infinite distance, it's going to be considered as the potential to be zero, because it's not influenced by anything from this line charge. So the work done in bringing a charge from infinity to a point inside this electric field is called as electric potential. So quite straightforward. So it's nothing but given by V equals W upon Q, where W is the work done and that's per unit charge. So every charge has got some work done, obviously, or some work was done on every charge to bring it from infinity to a point in that field. So a lot of charges over here, we did a lot of work to bring all of these charges over here, and over here the potential was, let's say, so this is at point A, this is point B. So potential at point A was 0, potential at point B is now considered as max. So if you look at the units, it's going to be, I'm going to be using an arrow, not an equal sign, because I'm focusing on the units of this. So V equals W upon Q. Work is given by the unit of joules, and coulomb for the charges. So it's joules per coulomb, or we can also consider that to be volts, in honor of the famous scientist Volta. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward. V equals W upon Q, that's potential. So I hope that's making sense. We started test charge, then we went on to the capital Q, then we talked about the electric current, then we talked about the electric potential. Now comes the important bit called as the resistance. Now, the resistance is nothing but an obstruction to any flow. That's pretty straightforward. So if we have, let's say, a lane and there's a lot of obstruction over here, and we are trying to go from the right to the left, and these are the obstruction points, so obviously the resistance is going to be slightly high as opposed to where there is no resistance. So this goes quite good. So the resistance is quite less in this case. So this is case A, this is case B. What do we understand from this is that if we have different materials, we're going to be having different resistances, right? So we're going to be understanding in the concept of the quantities on which resistance is dependent on. So the resistance is dependent on the length of the conductor, the area of cross section, it's inversely proportional to that, directly proportional to the temperature, is given by delta, or let's say delta T. Delta is nothing but change, and it is also dependent on the material. Now the material is slightly making sense towards specific resistance. I'm going to be coming down in a moment, resistance. Alright, so if I have, let's say, a piece of wire which is, let's say, so long, and then there's a piece of wire which is only this long. So obviously the opportunity for the resistance is really high in example A as compared to B. So when the length of the wire increases, the resistance definitely increases. So it's directly proportional. I hope that's making sense. Now in the second case, I got a very thick wire and I've got a very thin wire. As you now see, I've got wire has more room for the free electrons to move around as opposed to the wire which is quite thin. So it's quite densely packed. So the resistance offered in the thinner wire would be way large or way more than the resistance offered in the thick wire. So you know what, that's the example for, if you got, let's say, high powered tools, or let's say, devices, let's say a microwave or a drill machine, its power cord would be quite thicker as compared to something which is, let's say a mobile adapter, right? Or something very simple as probably a light bulb connected to a a handheld socket or something of that sort. So it's quite thin, because the power requirement for the smaller devices is quite less, like the mobile phone, whereas for a drill machine, or let's say a refrigerator or a microwave, is going to be way high. So the wire needs to be thick. Also, you might have noticed that the high power tension lines, the ones which are on the fields with the big towers, so they are very thick in nature. So you need to have less resistance, because they're going for long distances, isn't it? So as they're going for long distances, the resistance is definitely increasing. So sort of compensating it, you need to have thicker wires. So that's the idea. Coming to temperature, now if you start heating this, all right, I'm going to be just showing this by a different color. So if you start heating these wires, obviously when the temperature increases, what's going to happen is these free electrons start getting excited, and as soon as they start getting excited, they start moving helter-skelter. They start moving in a chaotic manner. What's going to happen is the potential difference when we applied, and the charge that is moving now is going to face way more resistance as it was slightly cooler. So when temperature increases, the free electrons inside the conductor are going to move really crazily, thus causing a huge amount of, let's say, friction, or let's say resistance for the charge to pass through. So when the temperature increases, the resistance definitely increases. Also, I would like to sort of deviate to the point of superconductors in this. Now, there is a concept about superconductors in which if we bring a conductor, let's say gold, or let's say a very good conductor, copper, gold, platinum, to a temperature of 0 degree Kelvin, or which is in Celsius as minus 273 degrees Celsius, what happens is we achieve superconductivity. What does this mean? It means that everything freezes, everything stops. When everything stops, there's basically no resistance. Our charge moves very smoothly. So to understand what or how low this temperature is, our Earth has experienced a natural lowest temperature of minus 80 degrees or something around that. So minus 273 degrees Celsius is way too less. So to get a refrigerator to come down to this chilling levels, and then pass electricity, probably is not so practical, but a lot of research is being done to make sense of if we can get superconductors at normal temperatures as well. If we do that, we're looking at something very futuristic. So probably EVs and green energy could actually be a reality then. So superconductors for the win. All right, so that's about temperature, and then we focus on materials. Now there are three basic categories of materials that we need to focus on, and that's going to be your insulators, your semiconductors, and conductors. Excuse me for my handwriting, but this is how it is. So we aren't focusing too much on semiconductors at the moment because they slightly behave in a different manner, but what we can understand is insulators have a very, very high resistance. Conductors have a very, very low resistance. All right, and semiconductors are somewhere in between, but not exactly like that. It works in a slightly different principle, but that's the important thing about insulators and conductors. Very, very high resistance. All right, so that's the idea about resistance, regarding length, regarding area of cross section. Oh, just by the way, area of cross section means the thickness. So basically I'm talking about this face over here, right? So I mean the thick wire and the thin wire. I hope that makes sense. So whenever we're discussing about area of cross section, it means the thickness in this sense, the face of the wire, that is. All right, and the temperature, obviously, so where temperature increases, the resistance increases, temperature decreases, the resistance obviously decreases. So that's why we need to have cooling units to sort of have the efficiency of the device going properly or well. The final bit is the material, as I've discussed, in insulators, semiconductors, and conductors. All right, we're going to be focusing on the conductors a bit more in the next session, and we're going to be getting on to the bits of EMF. All right, we're going to be talking about series and parallel circuits. We're going to be talking about work, and we're going to be talking about power, And then we're going to be finally talking about the cost of electricity consumed. Quite an interesting thing, this. If you get this whole idea, I believe the chapter is pretty much done. I hope you got this bit pretty much sorted out as well. If you have any difficulties, please let me know through the comment section. I would be really happy to address all of your concerns. And do check out the website as well. There's a lot of content over there to make sense of assignments, make sense of the MCQs that we put in regularly, and the tests over there for theory aspects as well. So that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this session of Current Electricity. Do like, share and subscribe. Do share with your friends about how this topic is. Do let me know as well if this makes sense to you in understanding. And yeah, keep on studying, keep on learning. Well done. All the best. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram.